Patriots offense had another rough practice today, and it is the last time reporters will be able to watch them work out this summer. According to Phil Perry, Drake Maye was sacked 7 times in his first 18 dropbacks. Maye also threw 2 interceptions, and they were, as Phil wrote on NBCSportsBoston.com, throws Maye would want back. The defense putting a lot of pressure on both the quarterback and the offensive line. All of this leading to Drake Maye and his protection being named 2 of Phil's stuck down on the day. And this is where we begin our deep dive, the last look we get at these guys besides preseason games and then in just a couple of weeks regular season games. Welcome into our Arbella Early Edition. I'm Trenni Casey. Along from WEEI, we have Meghan Ottolini. We also have Kayla Burton and our Patriots insider Phil Perry. Phil, you wrote a lot about him. How did the offense look today? And is it concerning that they had another meh practice before a preseason game?
So just a quick correction. No interceptions today for Drake Maye. That's on me, though, because the Maye report, which I write after every practice, isn't even up yet from today. Had some podcast situations going on. So that was yesterday's practice when he threw the 2 picks. He was better today, in my opinion, but to me, the pressure is concerning. This is something that has been the case for the Patriots really throughout camp. It was the case in Minnesota against that Brian Flores scheme. It was the case today yet again when the Patriots themselves were bringing all kinds of pressure. Linebackers from the second level, defensive backs off the edge. So on the one hand, maybe you take it as good news. It wasn't as though the offensive tackles, for example, were getting beat like a drum. But maybe the bad news is, in terms of the scheme, do they have everything sorted out? Is the communication where it needs to be? Does Drake Maye see where that pressure might be coming from? And can he adjust at the line well enough when he's actually under the threat of contact, Kayla, to be able to take care of those situations? It just looked like there were too many bodies in the backfield.
Yeah, a number of sacks here today, and I guess you can credit the defense for that being a positive, right? But on the offense, and specifically the offensive line, that's something that, in combination with Drake Maye and the offensive line at this point, that's kind of the concern right now. Do I think it's oh my gosh, they're going into week 1, it's a complete bust? No. But there's a lot of development, Mego, that needs to happen. And when I look at the offensive line, we're seeing a lot of mixes still. You're seeing Jared Wilson back at left guard, et cetera. But it doesn't seem like it's flowing correctly. And Ramondre Stevenson today backed that up. He was very candid to the media, saying there's just not the chemistry right now, at least between the running backs and the O-line. That needs to be completely cleaned up by week 1, by week 2, et cetera. So, Mego, I'm just a little bit more concerned between both. Maybe the inconsistencies with Drake Maye right now and the offensive line as a combination.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. And Phil, what you were speaking to, one thing that we haven't talked about enough, I think, with this team is the youth of it. And especially on offense, what you're asking, we've concentrated on that left side when it looked like Jared Wilson maybe had earned that starting role next to Will Campbell. How's that going to work on Drake Maye's blind side? But even now, I think everybody's kind of penciling in, hey, Travion Henderson is going to be the biggest weapon for the Patriots. And because the guy has been so explosive in 2 preseason games against other teams' backups, I just think that there's going to be a big learning curve for everybody on this offense, and that's a lot of what we're seeing at this end of training camp. Maybe we all hoped that it would be these deep bombs that we know Drake Maye is physically able to do, Trenni, and able to throw and connect with Steph Diggs down there, and we can pencil in, okay, Steph Diggs is going to have 12 touchdowns. That's simply not the case. I think we're looking at a team that's still going to be working through a lot in September.
So I think most rational fans understand that this would be a work in progress, right? Like, you have a lot of young players. You have a second-year quarterback with the first time he's ever working with Josh McDaniels, which is a very complex offense. But what I do want to know is, have you seen a regression or a progression from Drake Maye? Because I think most people thought he looked pretty good at the start of camp, and it feels like, at least from everybody's reporting, that maybe he's taken a step back.
Okay, so I'll start here. I think we need to talk about what we weigh in the preseason, because what we always say as the media is joint practices are the best indication of how these guys are going to play and actually their compete level, because there are so many reps of the ones versus the ones, unlike we've seen in these preseason games. And it is notable that Drake has been solid to very good in the joint practices. So to me, that's what I'm putting the weight on. Yes, Monday it was a slower practice and they're in shorts and shells, and he throws these inexplicable picks. One of them right to Robert Spillane, where it's like I was talking to Phil and I said, Phil, does he think he's a ghost? How is he throwing through Robert Spillane's body? It doesn't even make sense, this read. But at the same time, I think when it's come down to what we say matters most, Drake has been good.
Phil, though, is it any concern that when he goes up against the twos, and maybe this is just him taking his foot off the gas a little bit, knowing he's not going against the same caliber of players in the preseason games? We've seen some other young quarterbacks have some success when they're going against the team's twos and threes, where Drake Maye has struggled in those situations.
Yeah, it's really odd. It is hard to explain because some of his best practices this year were those two practices in Minnesota, in my opinion. Today, for example, he was better. It was a very competitive practice today. A lot of 11-on-11, the first-team offense against the first-team defense, and he was slow to start. Stop me if you've heard this before. He was slow to start. He completed 3 of his first 6 passes, but then he completed 70% of his passes the rest of the way, and he was great in the 2-minute drill. They started on their own 25-yard line. They had 1 minute, 30 seconds left on the clock. He completed 5 of 7 attempts. They moved the ball 49 yards down the field. They were set up for a very easy field goal, which was the goal. So he finished strong today, and I think, is he progressing? Is he regressing? He's still in his early 20s, he's about to be 23 years old. It's really difficult to say anything in terms of this is like a linear progression. It's going to be dips and dives, and there are going to be peaks and valleys, Kayla. And I think today was actually, he's kind of getting back on the upswing after a couple of down days.
And Kayla, one of the issues, and you mentioned it, that Ramondre Stevenson said today, is that there's not that chemistry between the running backs and the offensive line. It feels like that's sort of missing from the offensive line as well. How much do you think maybe the instability in front of Drake Maye is sort of contributing to what's going on?
It definitely contributes. You have to have a stable offensive line in order to at least feel protected. This guy, think about what he did last year, right? He was scrambling on every single play. Not because he wanted to, everybody. He had to. So you have to think about this, too. He's only had his UNC experience, and then he goes to the NFL, only plays really half whatever the season, if that, and then is scrambling on every single play. So he has to really still learn what the NFL is, and now under a new offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. So he almost needs to settle in. You're seeing him hang in a little bit more in the pocket, buying more time, kind of going through his progressions to see who he can hit downfield. And I think that in these joint practices in the preseason games, and I mentioned Dan Orlovsky kind of, really dissecting this on film, he had some opportunities. There was pop on a seam route, an incredible route that he ran, and he had him. He could throw over the defense and get him, but he's just a little reluctant or hesitant to do so, or he blatantly missed him. So it's those things, those kinks, Trenni, that he needs to work out. And I just think, to both of these guys' point, him buying a little bit more time, understanding that the expectations may have to be lowered as a fan base to realize he's new. He's still new to the NFL, and there's going to be adjusting.
Yeah, there are really high expectations, though, for him. Julian Edelman spoke to Tom E. Curran for an upcoming episode of the Patriots Talk podcast, and the former Pats wideout says people should temper the expectations for the second-year pro.
A lot of these young quarterbacks that have come in and lit up the league have kind of skewed up the expectation factor for a lot of young quarterbacks. He's still developing into a quarterback. Drake Maye's going into a new offense, learning a new language, only in his second year in the National Football League with a whole new team. So, there's going to be ups and downs.
Phil, is it possible that maybe Josh McDaniels is throwing too much at Drake Maye and he's not handling it as well as maybe everyone thought he would?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question for us to ask, and it's something that I'm sure Josh McDaniels will have to try to gauge as this season goes on. Okay, how much are we giving him? How much are we putting on his plate? And how is he responding? And do we have to, maybe change the pace with which we are unloading on him when it comes to scheme and when it comes to language? Because if you're sensing in a couple of practices that it's not going so great, we see this around the league too. And I'm wondering if it's what happened with Caleb Williams in that preseason game that everybody just watched. Everybody's been so thrilled with, because the reports out of Chicago is that he's been brutal in the practices leading up. And so you look at it and say, okay, did Ben Johnson do something in that game just to help him build his confidence? Did Kevin O'Connell, for instance, in that second Vikings practice, did he do some things for J.J. McCarthy that helped him build his confidence? Because it's been a really rocky summer for him as well. And he had a brutal day one of joint practices. He bounces back, maybe with a little help from his coach, manages things in a certain way, and now all of a sudden you're feeling more confident. So does Josh McDaniels have to do that for Maye? Does he have to do it for this offensive line? Because when there are things like defensive backs coming off the edge, unprotected, You look at the quarterback in those instances and say, well, did he know that? Would he have gotten rid of the football more quickly if this was a situation where he was really under the threat of contact? Those are all pertinent questions that McDaniels needs to ask.
All right. Well, for more on Tom's conversation with Julian Edelman, you can check out the latest Patriots Talk podcast. Scan the QR code on the screen. Also find it on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube.